right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Sorry about that. Letting the table quiet down a little bit. All right. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the Transportation Committee meeting to order. As a reminder, this meeting is being shared virtually through Zoom for those who couldn't join us in person today and is being recorded. So committee members, please remember to turn on your microphone before speaking so those online in the room can hear you, and also state your name and representation, which is helpful for those online. So we'll go ahead and go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. I'd like to start. And my name is Kevin Carrier, representing Lake County.
Tara Orban, representing Cook County.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
Scott Weber, alternate for Tom Vanderwood, Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission.
John Paul Diepla, FHWA.
Christina Kapkowski, Will County.
Scott Hennings, McHenry County.
Heidi Files, Kane County.
Heidi Lichtenberger, Kendall County.
John Loper, DuPage County.
Audrey Wenning, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Mark Kane, FTA. Eric Llewellyn, Pace.
Heather Mullins, RTA.
David Kralik, Metro.
Jack Cruikshank, Illinois EPA.
Amy Reinell, Active Transportation Alliance.
Joseph Schofer, Northwestern University.
And Henry Giroir, Illinois Tollway.
Steve Schulge, IDOT Region 1.
Chuck Abraham, IDOT YPI.
Megan Swanson, IDOT OPMP.
And Kara Bader from CTA has also joined us for the record.
Thanks, Amy.
All right. The Transportation Committee has received a request from Mary Nickel with CDOT and Mayor Rockingham with council mayors to participate remotely in the meeting this morning. They made the request in compliance with the requirements of the Illinois Open Meetings Act. This request requires a majority vote of this body by a voice vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Vote passes. All right, moving on to agenda items and announcements. We don't have any items or announcements today. Do we have any announcements from committee members? Seeing none. Moving on to item 3, we have approval of the minutes. Before us are the draft minutes from our May 30th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as presented?
So moved. DuPage.
Oh, we got Amy with CMAP. I get a second?
Second, Kane County.
Okay, get a second. Any discussion, questions on this item? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 4.0, Amy is with us this morning and she'll be providing an update on CMAP activities.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the August Transportation Committee meeting. I want to say a special thank you to Metro because I take you all for granted too much every day. Now that the BNSF is experiencing the derailment right now, I know my drive-in today was not great. So that's a look ahead for all of us, a cautionary tale, right, if we're not taking care of transit moving forward. Between our last meeting and today, we've had a series of CMAP engagements I just want to highlight for you all. At the start of the summer, Executive Director Aaron Alleman and Elizabeth Scott joined Elevated Chicago for a conversation on the future of transit funding and governance. CMAP staff members also participated in Transport Chicago, where we moderated a panel on transit funding and reform and shared strategies to advance transportation decarbonization. At this year's Ezra User Conference in San Diego, CMAP also featured its Northeastern Illinois Development Database. And this tool it helps our local governments to contribute data to our regional forecasting model. So we were very, very proud to be able to highlight that at this year's conference. And finally, we wrapped up our 17th annual Future Leaders in Planning program, FLIP. This summer program introduces high school students from across the region to urban planning through hands-on learning, site visits to places like East Garfield Park, O'Hare, and sessions on GIS, housing, and transportation. We're really proud to help nurture the next generation of planners. And here we're featuring just a few photos from this year's session. On to other news. CMAP, we are very fortunate that the state legislature this past session appropriated $2 million to CMAP to address directives in the Regional Planning Act that task CMAP with not only working on transportation issues, which we usually gather on today, but also on land use, economic development, water, and more. The additional funding will also provide us with some resiliency in the face of uncertain federal funding. And we will have a longer legislative update later today by Kasha to provide other important updates on the state and federal level. Next up, 2025 Technical Assistance Funding Awards. We also want to mention there are 30 new projects selected for technical assistance this year. These projects, displayed on the screen, thank you, span communities across northeastern Illinois and address a range of local priorities, including Americans with Disability Act transition planning, bicycle and pedestrian safety, capital improvements, pavement management, and transportation safety. Chosen from a highly competitive pool of more than 80 applications, the selected projects reflect strong regional demand for planning support and align with the core principles of ON2 2050. The 2050 list of projects was selected following a joint call for projects with the RTA, which has also finalized selections for its community planning program. Thank you to our friends from the RTA here for your continued partnership. And then 2025 Community Data Snapshots. This is one of our CMAP's most popular work products. The Community Data Snapshots help local leaders and the public track progress and make informed decisions in their communities. These data-rich snapshots, one for each of the region's 284 municipalities, 77 Chicago community areas, and 7 counties. They summarize demographics, housing, employment, transportation habits, and other key details. I've also seen my kids bring home this because I guess the school teachers use this too. So just wanted to let you know, we update this every year. The new update is now released. And then next up, Safe Routes to School. IDOT is announcing that they are accepting applications for the 2025 Safe Routes to School program. This is a 100% federally funded opportunity to improve how students get to and from school. Through both infrastructure and non-infrastructure projects, Safe Routes to School helps make school routes safer and more accessible, and encourages active transportation for children of all ages and abilities. Eligible applicants include schools, school districts, municipalities, counties, townships, planning agencies, and other public entities. Applications are being accepted until October 13th. For more information, please visit IDOT's website. And then a look ahead at today's agenda. We're going to start off with RTA that will be presenting. They will be presenting a program of projects for the Section 5310 program. CMAP will then share some early insights related to our next comprehensive regional plan, which has been recently dubbed as the Century Plan, as well as progress on the RTP and some key underlying activities that you all will want to continue to be engaged with. Finally, we'll wrap up with Kasha, who will provide a legislative update highlighting state and federal developments. Before I hand things over back to the chair, a friendly reminder that our next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, September 12th. And with that, I turn things back over to you, Kevin.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. As always, great updates. And I just want to say we just wrapped up having our summer interns at DOT and kind of do a debrief with them. And they kind of all mentioned how helpful programs like that are to kind of, as they're figuring out what they want to do with their careers and make sure they're on the right path. So just want to kudos. All the updates are great, but to the FLIP program and you guys continuing that, that's great. So just want to mention that.
Hey, Kevin, real quick, do we have a way to turn this screen on? Okay,
Oh, yeah.
awesome. Thanks, sir.
And for those online, we got a We got a screen in the room that's turned off, so we're just going to pause for a minute and see if we can get that turned on. So. All right, brief pause while we're working through a technical issue here, but we still should get everyone out of here in time for Lollapalooza, so no worries. Thanks, Jack, for bringing that up, though. All right, moving on to items, item 5.01. Russell is here with us today. We'll provide an overview of the fiscal year 2023 through 2028 Transportation Improvement Program amendments. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning. Included in your packet today are the 77 formal tip changes shown on Amendment 25-10 and the 206 tip changes shown on Administrative Amendments 25-10.1 and 25-10.2. Formal amendments resulted in an increase of $282.7 million in total project costs for all prior, current, and future years. Here are a few highlights. As you can see, there were a number of new projects being added to the TIP. In fact, 61% of the formal changes are new projects that are being added to the TIP. About half of those came from our friends at IDOT, all of which are maintenance projects, such as bridge deck overlays, resurfacings, or ADA improvements, many of which are targeting the November letting, so they're going quite quickly. IDOT also recently announced, this is not District 1, but IDOT OP&P, which projects were awarded ITEP funds, and many of those projects that were awarded ITEP funds are also being added to the TIP at this time. The ITEP funding is a mix of IDOT funds and federal funds, so some of those are formal changes, the federal fund ones, and then the administrative changes are the ones that are not using any federal funds. Administrative amendments added $214.3 million in total into the TIP in all prior, current, and future years. The net change for total costs in the TIP from all amendments resulted in $497 million being added to the TIP in prior, current, and future years. As I already mentioned, new projects comprise most of the formal changes, while administrative amendments were primarily schedule changes and AC and ACC changes. Accounting for the amendments presented to you today, the TIP remains physically constrained. The amendments were posted on July 25th for committee and public review. Approval of formal TIP Amendment 25-10 is requested, and after the motion has been made, I can answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve TIP Amendment 25-10.
So moved, Toley.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, DuPage.
Thank you, John. All right, any questions for Russell? Yes, go ahead.
We can talk about this later, Russell, but I'm just curious if there's an easy way for us to learn if the resurfacing projects are including any safety or complete streets improvements as now directed under state law.
IDOT's here, they can respond to that, but I believe that these particular improvements, Steve, I'll defer to you, actually.
I can answer that. So as far as complete the streets on resurfacing projects, we have elected to redo all the ADA curb ramps, which would include accessibility there. We do APS now, so that's a newer policy. So that's the audio for all signals as well through the corridor. And then usually if a municipality requests a sidewalk, for example, and if it doesn't require right-of-way, then we sometimes accommodate it. Well, most of the time we would, but sometimes if it requires right-of-way, then it gets kicked back either into a formal phase one or a local municipality through ITIP or through other mechanisms have put in paths and sidewalks that require right-of-way and that are kind of out of the scope of a resurfacing. So it's kind of a mix of both. But at the bare minimum for resurfacings, we do all of the ADA, and then we do APS, and then it would all be fresh striping for all the crosswalks and everything.
I would also add that the projects that are being added, the new ones, are throughout the region, so they're scattered all about, but many of them are already in built environments in which there already is complete streets.
Yes. And we have situations, we have a current situation in Elgin right now that they don't have an existing crosswalk, but it doesn't require right of way, so we have to cut into the islands, and now we need design exceptions. So we do modifications at the intersections, which is really where our jurisdiction is, kind of. And then as far as if there's a gap connection, that's kind of local municipality led, if it requires right of way. If it doesn't, then we look to try to include it.
Just a question or asking for clarification. You mentioned in your question about state law, like, does the state law require that these improvements be listed in the tip? Oh, okay, yeah. Because I think
Just that there's the opportunity to add some safety improvements or complete streets enhancement if there aren't right-of-way issues. So I was just curious if there's a way we could understand at a glance which of these projects.
Yeah,
have
within
that.
the tip, we do have implementers. When they enter a project into the tip, they select the work types that correspond to the scope of the work. And if there are safety improvements, there are a number of work types within the drop-down menu that they can select for. So if they're touching that as part of the scope of the work, they will select those work types because they're seeking federal authorization to do that type of work.
Yeah, but also as a clarification, Russ, it's a great point, but I don't believe that that's standardized. And I think that the safety improvements that you're looking for are baked into the cake and the scope of work for any resurfacing project, because all of the elements that you mentioned, Steve, are representative of a standard scope of work for any resurfacing project. So I think it would be the exception, not the rule, if you saw a resurfacing project that did not include ADA curb ramps, accessible pedestrian signals, because it's all part of like what's triggered when a local agency does a resurfacing project. It would be the exception if those improvements were not included, a rare one. I mean, I'm looking for the other implementers for acknowledgement, yeah.
It depends. You get out into the rural areas of my county, we don't have any.
Right, but when an agency is resurfacing and there are ADA curb ramps, those are evaluated and
Correct.
upgraded to meet current standards
Correct,
as
but-
part of a resurfacing improvement. So those safety enhancements, if they're intersecting the improvement of the roadway, those are enhanced, right? But if there's no pedestrian system,
Right, but so your statement that they're just kind of baked into the cake is not necessarily a true statement.
True.
Because I have roadways on my network due to their rural nature. There
with
are
no pedestrian
There's
facilities.
no pedestrian, so we would not have necessarily ADA improvements or safety improvements associated with that vulnerable user as part of our projects on a resurfacing project.
Thank you for that. Yes. So where they exist presently, yes, the upgrades would be included.
And again, just to go back to the original question, within the tip, those work types, I know for a fact that IDOT seldom selects just resurfacing. They often pick resurfacing, ADA improvements, and whatever other parts of the project. We've encouraged programmers to do that because most projects are not just a simple LAFO, which would be much more straightforward, but most of them are doing all these other enhancements per the regular project. A regular project now includes all of these other improvements now, and we do try to reflect that when we can.
All right. Any other? Yes, Aubrey.
Just to follow up to Steve's comment that if there's a gap, then filling that gap is led by local municipality. Can you tell us a little bit more about like IDOT's view on network connectivity of pedestrian infrastructure, or what the process would be for that municipality to get their pedestrian elements into a project?
Certainly. So for a local municipality, we typically There's a couple items, right? So if we're doing a normal resurfacing, we send preliminary, pre-final, and final plans to the municipality, and at that time they comment anything within the intersection area. So the trigger there would be ADA, which yes, would meet ProAg and national standards. We have to upgrade everything, crosswalks. If there's gap in connectivity, that's something that municipality, like take Lake Villa, for example, they requested a sidewalk, but it would have required right away. And then we typically respond to them saying, okay, well, unfortunately with this project, it would require right away. So please look at these grants and start a preliminary engineering phase one. And so they typically start that phase one process to do those gaps. We don't necessarily have a gap analysis. We did put together, I know OPMP put together several bike and ped, regional planning on that level. But in general, we do defer to the local municipalities to identify those gaps and then start applying and starting those phase ones for those gaps. If it is an intersection reconstruction project, we do extend our sidewalks, to logical termini. And so when we widen the travel way per the state law, that's when we get into, well, when we're already, for projects that are already acquiring right of way, that we take care of sidewalks and we look at gaps and we do all of that. Right of way projects are about 20-30% of what we do. So, 20-30% of our projects are looking at those gaps, but it's just the resurfacing projects, which is a majority of the program, is just those deck overlays and resurfacings. Those we don't, when it comes to right of way, that's when we rely on the locals to try to lead something. Hopefully that answered your question.
All right, any other questions for Russell? See, now we have a motion, a second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Russell. Just one item this week, huh? Get you next time. All right, moving along. Informational items. 6.01, Heather Mullins with the RTA is here to provide an update on the Section 5310 recommended program of projects. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name's Heather Mullins. I'm the Division Manager of the Local Planning and Program Management Group at the RTA, and I'm going to provide an overview of our FY 2024 and 2025 call for projects for the Section 5310 program. Next slide. Okay, so the Section 5310 program is a federal formula grant program that provides assistance to public transportation projects that focus on enhancing mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. The RTA became the designated recipient for the Section 5310 program with the Illinois Department of Transportation in 2013. So as a co-designated recipient of the Section 5310 program, RTA awards and administers operating, mobility management, and capital improvement projects, while IDOT awards and administers grants for paratransit vehicles. Next slide. No one can hear me. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so project selection for the program is guided by the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan, the HSTP, which was updated and adopted by the RTA in March of 2021. The locally developed HSTP identifies the transportation needs of individuals with disabilities, older adults, and people with low incomes, and provides strategies for meeting those local needs, and prioritizes transportation services and projects for funding and implementation. Next slide. Okay, so the HSTP recommended 9 goals and strategies to meet the transportation needs of seniors and people with disabilities listed on this slide. Projects selected into the Section 5310 program must meet at least one of these goals, and every one of the projects in our program does. So we also recently initiated the process to update the HSTP and expect that to be done within probably 10 months from now. So we will have a new HSTP and new goals and strategies for our next call for projects. Next slide. This is an overview of the timeline for this year's call for projects. We opened the program on March 20th. Applications were due about 5 weeks later on April 24th. During the month of May, we had all the applicants provide a presentation to our project selection team and engage in a Q&A with the project selection team as well. We then put together our recommended program project, which opened for a 30-day public comment period in July that just wrapped up this week. We did receive 15 comments, all in support of the projects or the overall program. So our next step is to go to the RTA board for approval of the program projects at our August 21st board meeting. So we do conduct a call every other year. We combine 2 years of funding. So our next call will be probably in spring of 2027. Next slide. Right, some details on the funding we had available for the call. We had about 20 million in federal funding for 2 years. That was about 800,000 less than what was available for our last call, which was 2022-2023 funding. However, we did talk to IDOT and they agreed to lower their allocation for vehicle procurements from what is normally 5.5 million to 3.5 million, which left us with slightly more funding this round than the last round. So we had about 16.5 million that the RTA was able to use for operating mobility management and capital projects. Next slide. So we received 15 applications for a total of 27.7 million, which overprogrammed us by about $11 million. The staff is recommending 16 projects, which are listed on this slide and the next slide. So applications are recommended based on their eligibility, their need for funding, particularly for returning operating projects, and the project selection team member scoring and ranking. So the project selection team consists of staff from IDOT, CMAP, Easter Seals, and the RTA. Many of the projects in the recommended program are current Section 5310 subrecipients for operating projects, so you'll recognize some of these projects. So there are a few that I want to highlight that are new or different. The first is the CTA. So funding will support the installation of real-time digital station customer information enhancements up to 8 CTA rail stations. The displays will include audio functionality such as audio buttons or similar tools that provide audible descriptions of the visual content to ensure customers who are blind, have low vision, or face difficulty accessing visual information can independently receive the same critical service updates. Next slide. So Grundy County. So the Grundy Transit System is a demand response community program for Grundy County provided for the general public with a special emphasis on transportation for seniors and people with disabilities. Demand response services are available Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., except a few holidays. The buses operate throughout all of Grundy County with delivery points to portions of Will County as well. So 2 townships in Grundy County are part of the MPO, and so those 2 townships are eligible for Section 5310 funding, and they can only spend the money within those 2 townships. Metra. So funding is to purchase and install digital station display signage systems. These signs provide visual information that is a requirement to be compliant with ADA law. As it pertains to transit stations, and they are particularly beneficial for people with hearing impairments and seniors with disabilities. We awarded funding to Metra during the last cycle as well for the same project. So this funding will be used to continue implementation. All right, and then finally, the RTA, this is our 16th project. So the RTA is eligible to take up to 10% of the funding off the top of the program without submitting an application for administrative projects. So we are awarding ourselves funding to conduct a region-wide dial-a-ride coordination study to determine strategies for county-level dial-a-ride services to better coordinate services across county lines. Right, next slide. Our next steps here. We did wrap up our public comment period this week, so we are going to bring the recommended program projects to our board for approval at the August 21st meeting. Assuming we get approval at that meeting, our next step is to apply a formal application to the FTA they approve that application, and then we're able to distribute the funding via contracts with all the subrecipients. We expect that to start happening probably Q2 of 2026. I think that's their next slide. That's it. Happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. Any questions, comments, discussion for Heather? Yeah, Carrie, you got some, yeah.
Thanks, RTA. We're really excited about our signage project. If you've been at the new RPM stations that just opened, it's allowing us to take that type of real-time alert signage and put it in a few more stations that won't be up for a major modernization soon. We came to this with coordination with our ADA Advisory Council that is really a fan of the push button enunciators in addition to the real-time elevator outages. So we were just very happy for favorable consideration. So thanks.
Yeah, and I could say a couple things quick. I think it's helpful for the committee to maybe understand a little nuance. So we, in many of the counties, have coordinated systems. So in Lake County, we have the Rye Lake County system. So first, we appreciate being considered and all that you guys do. We've made some efforts kind of following McHenry and going countywide. Just so to clarify for everyone, the PACE is required to provide ADA paratransit service within 3/4 of a fixed route. Many of the counties, don't have a lot of density, so we're not covered. So we had a kind of a piecemeal system in Lake County, and because of this program, we're able to kind of go countywide, and it's been, very favorable. So just to kind of clarify the difference between like these coordinated services, like the PACE ADA paratransit service that's provided. But very interested to kind of see what happens with your guys' study, because we are hearing now that we're countywide. There's people like, hey, how do I get from the McHenry County service to Lake County service or vice versa too? So definitely kudos. We appreciate all this and all that you guys do for coordinating this, and looking forward to that. So
Thank you.
any other questions or comments? All right. Thanks, Heather. Appreciate the time. All right, moving on to item 6.02, the Century Plan update. Elizabeth Scott is here to provide an overview of the region's new comprehensive plan. Good morning.
Good morning. I'll see if am I tall enough for this? I think I am. I'm going to say I am. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Scott. I'm a principal in CMAP's Regional Policy and Implementation team, but I'm here to talk to you about a project that's really an effort of our whole agency. So last time we were with the committee talking about this project was last year, when we were in the real conceptual, how do we want to approach this stuff kind of phase of this work. And now we've made quite a bit of progress around our scope and kind of gotten underway. So we felt like it was a good time. We haven't even done the public kickoff of the project, but we felt like it was a good time to come and report back to you about where we were at and how things are shaping up. So the Century Plan, which has been recently named, is going to be what comes after onto 2050. So it'll be the region's next comprehensive plan, just to like anchor you in what we're talking about today. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of reminder of why we're approaching it the way that we are, a little discussion about what that's going to mean in practice, and then give you a teaser of some of the things that we're learning as we're doing regional analysis, which is part of this thing to figure out how can we tell the region's story in terms of how we've been doing the last 10 years and what that might mean for how we think about the future. So just to ground us, a reminder, and this came up in Amy's opening comments as well, CMAP has two sets of planning responsibilities. One given to us by the federal government through federal MPO guidelines. That's going to be the most familiar and close at hand, to this group of people. But we also have responsibilities given to us in 2005 through the Illinois Regional Planning Act. And so that was the act that established CMAP by combining our predecessor agencies, CATS and NIPSI, the land planning agency, and the MPO for the region. And so the intention was that we kind of like bring this land planning and transportation planning, bring these functions together to more comprehensively understand our assets and challenges and serve the region better. So we've always had these kind of dual mandates, and part of the mandate for us from the state is that we produce a comprehensive plan that will establish the foundation for all planning in the region, guide the physical development of the region, and it has a long list of things that we need to be providing insight and direction on, including things related to the environment and land use, all of the stuff that is important in addition to planning, if you want to think comprehensively about the region. So we have both of these things. Next slide, please. Over the 20-year history of our agency, we've kind of approached these responsibilities in one way. So in the previous 20 years, what we have done is to say, okay, we're going to make a huge plan. We are going to periodically make a huge plan that is the life, the universe, and everything plan of all plans of everything. We're going to do 1 million position papers, ask you all to come to 1 million committee meetings and go through this like huge 3-year process to create a regional comprehensive plan that we will then do kind of a small update for and then replace about 10 years after that. And we've had a lot of success with that. You know, the Go to 2040 plan won the National Planning Award the year that it came out. We were tremendously proud of it and the progress that the region has been able to make under this model. On to 2050 picked up some of those themes and continue to push them farther. But, you know, when we've been real introspective about what this approach has and has not done for us, things that we have heard from you all and other stakeholders is, gosh, that, you know, could you figure out a way to be more timely because our world is changing fast, you know, something that you put this huge effort into and then needs to be good for us for like 10 years. Is there a way we can, a structure that can be more timely? And we've also heard, well, some of this stuff is 1 mile wide and 1 inch deep, and we would like you to be less wide, but deeper. So can you create a structure that will provide the same kind of, create the same kind of regional table to help get us in the same direction, but maybe think about how the planning can be done in a way that can allow implementers and others, and also CMAP, to pick up what's coming out of it and do something with it more easily. So that's kind of our thought process of, well, maybe we don't want to follow the 2040 and 2050 model anymore. We want to try something different. So what we are doing is the Century Plan. We're decoupling from a year because we will follow the federal guidelines that require the year through the Regional Transportation Plan, which we'll still do according to federal rules. But this planning process is really thinking about, okay, over the next century, over the next 30 years, 50 years, 75 years, what is it going to take for our region to continue to compete globally, to thrive, to give the kind of quality of life that people want and expect here? And sometimes the trends that we're going to be looking at are going to be closer in, sometimes they'll be further out. But really the question is like, what is it going to take for Northeastern Illinois to be the best that it can be and arrive up at the year 2100 in the best possible position to go forward, you know? So what are the investments that need to be made now to enable that future, whether it's defending us against something bad that could happen or embracing something good that's already starting to happen, thinking on that super long range time frame, which I know for transportation implementers is familiar because you cannot get big stuff done fast. You are thinking in 30-year arcs, you're thinking in 50-year arcs, and this is meant to be complementary to that so that we can spend some focused time and energy asking, you know, there's a lot of things that are important in our world, but if we take a kind of scientific approach to understanding this, among all those important things, what things are going to be most
hold on a sec.
important for our future success?
Oh, I turn off.
Oh, we maybe need a mute on the Zoom. But I think I'm confident you all understand what I'm saying. It's and why is it called the Century Plan? Well, it's meant to evoke the planning history of Chicago, the Burnham Plan, Century of Progress, all of the stuff that's in our amazing planning history here, and hopefully link what we're able to do like in this generation to the great things that have been done in the past. So that's how we kind of arrived at that. And how we're going to, at a high level, how we're going to approach it is we're going to create a more sort of lean and mean plan that is about the future and how the region wants to show up for it. And then on a rolling basis, under the umbrella of the direction provided by that plan, we'll produce topical plans that dig deep on issues that rise to the front as like essential for our future success. So the one plan won't try to be the end all be all on the topics that we need to get into, but it'll be more directional about, among all of the things that we could be concerned about and are important to our future, among all the important things, what is rising is most important, and how is the region going to create consensus and organize ourselves to tackle those things head on? So that's kind of the idea. And it's a little different from what we were doing before, but we're hopeful that it will produce results that people find usable and like relatable and feel like I have a sense of connection to and ownership of. And groups like the TC are going to be really important in helping us figure out, how to get there. So I once again preempted my own slides. This next slide, please. But to think about it, it's like, so we're going to be in this space, we're going to be asking questions like, where is the region today? Where are we currently headed? Where could we end up? What defines the region at its best? Where does the region want to go? And how would the region get there? How does the region get there? Next slide. And so kind of as I said, we're gonna be looking for highest priorities and be very focused on building consensus on what the top challenges and opportunities are. And we want this plan to be an articulation of what's bubbling in the region, informed by the best data and information that CMAP can bring to the table to help shape and facilitate those conversations. We want to come out of it with like a real clear plan of what we can do about some of these things, and ideas for partnerships and other things to get started. So, and why are we doing this format? Because we really believe that the region can do more when we work together. So, okay, role for the committees. We're going to be coming back to you all throughout this process to talk to you about what we're learning. There'll be if you've ever been along for a CMAP big planning process before, you'll know that there's like a million different ways to plug in, and we'll be letting you guys know that on a rolling basis. But at a minimum, we'll be coming back to the committees and sharing with you what we're learning, and trying to get direction in these spaces. We're looking for input and direction, but we're going to be doing a lot of civic conversations, stakeholder conversations, some of which may be like very present and interesting and compelling to you, and some of which are like, I've never thought of that issue before. And that would be appropriate for this kind of effort that's trying to be comprehensive. But yeah, at certain points, we'll kind of maybe ask you to get out the word on some stuff for us, or, suggest people that we should be talking to who aren't in our network, who would benefit from being part of this conversation, or the conversation would be benefited from them being part of it. Next slide, please. And so kind of more as a practical matter, like what are we actually doing here? Where we are now is we're gearing up for our public-facing launch in November, and more on that in a little bit. And so the teams are working in the background, trying to understand a clear picture of the existing conditions in the region. We've also initiated a scenario planning process to really try to look into the medium and far future and understand what things could be on the horizon for Northeastern Illinois as a kind of larger community. This will kind of kick into a more external phase once we launch in November, and we're going to be cultivating dialogue around what are we learning about how the region is now? What are we learning about what could shape our future in important ways? And having a variety of types of civic conversations, community scale conversations, stakeholder and industry conversations to kind of validate with people that what we're learning is right, and make adjustments to it so it actually reflects the reality on the ground, reflects everybody's sort of lived experience here. And it will be the role of the CMAP staff to kind of, do a lot of thinking, do a lot of learning, do a lot of listening, and then try to roll all of this up into a plan that expresses a short list of top priorities that we hope that the region can come to consensus on. So this will not be on to 2050 with like 300 recommendations in it. It'll have like 5 or 10. And that's something different for us. So we're going to be looking for all of you to help make sure that we are landing up in the right place. And so teaser here now about what we're learning about some of the regional trends. We can go to the next slide, and even actually the next one is we've been sharing some work with the Regional Transportation Plan team, which has been here more talking with y'all. So some of this stuff may be familiar, but some of it is an expansion of what would be included in the Regional Transportation Plan purview. But we're starting to, you know, we're looking at, particularly over the last 10 years, what can we see about how the region has changed since we made the On to 2050 plan? The impact of COVID on our communities, how people are living is a really huge one to try and get our arms around and understand. And at a high level, we're going to be, you know, asked sort of, I mean, I say this cheekily, but like starting with the question of like, how's the patient, doctor? Because we know that we have a lot of assets, but we know that our future is not assured when it comes to all of them. So like our kind of flat population growth and so on are things for us to have attention to. How this has meaning for the transportation sector, for transportation implementers, is that we are studying the development and economy of the region and going to contextualize our transportation challenges within those broader like needs and trends. So it's bringing some of those conversations to a broader civic table that is maybe not in it as much as you guys are all the time, and trying to be like, okay, here are the 5 most important things you need to know about transportation, about the economy, about how our population demographics is going, and so on. So just to give you an example of what that could look like, we can go to the next slide. Eventually, we will go there. It's the internet. All right, well, I'll just start. So one thing that is a long-term trend that we're seeing is that our population growth is pretty flat. And this is the same as, you know, from the kind of what we were seeing in the On to 2050 years. We're about 8.6 million people living in a little bit less than 300 communities, as you all know. 2/3 of residents in Illinois live in northeastern Illinois, and our region covers a land area 2 times the size of the state of Delaware. So we've got a lot of different kind of places that we need to understand, from the most rural to the most urban. And so thinking about population in that context is really important. So you'll see here on the left, we had the, once again, poorest population growth compared to our major metro peer regions across the country. And some of that is a story about migration, and some of it is a story about children. But the important thing is that to know that we're expanding our land area, we're expanding our development footprint, but we're not really expanding jobs or population, and we have to think about what that means. And so on the right, you'll see we have, although while we're having flat population growth, we have had a lot of household growth. And some of this is about technology, and some of this is about just like changing preferences as the populations cycle through. So like in my own life, I went from being in a place with 1.5 bedrooms, like a real bedroom and a crummy guest room, to being in a place with 3 bedrooms because my partner and I both have hybrid work. And so we probably doubled the square footage we're in. And this is not an uncommon story for people. So thinking about what does that mean for density? What does that mean for demand for transportation? What does it mean where people are living? What does it mean where people can afford to live? If people, you know, demand for work from home space is taking up all of the family-sized housing. What does that mean for families? You know, so we're thinking about these kinds of issues. Next slide. Another big trend for the region that we are watching is how our generations are moving through and what generations are going to become are now and are becoming a greater degree like a bigger part of our communities. So we've had a very large growth in the share of senior citizens, people over 65, as the baby boomer generation has entered that phase of their life. At the same time, millennials and Gen Zers are not having, and also to some extent Gen Xers, like working age adults are not having children at the same rates that they used to. This is a national trend, but it's also showing up locally. So we have to think about things like, okay, in 10 years, when we have some townships where 45% of the people who live there are over 45 years old or 65 years old. Are we prepared for that? Are we prepared for their housing needs, their mobility needs, things like that? And at the same time, we have to think about what kind of opportunities are we making for working age adults to come here and be part of our economy, because we need that too. So next slide. We're also looking at land use and trying to understand how the region has changed over the last 10 years. So as of 2020, 44% of the land area in the region is considered developed, meaning there's some type of building or structure associated with it. And this varies really widely for us, from 16% of developed land in Kendall County to 73% in Cook and DuPage counties. And since 2010, we have converted 26,000 acres approximately of agricultural use to other land uses. Some of that has been greenfield development, so new housing, new commercial, whatever. But in some cases, it's farmland being put into conservation. And actually, I think depending on how you see things, one bright spot or interesting spot is that both in Lake and Kane counties, more farmland has been put into conservation than has been put into development, reflecting some of the future land use plan priorities of those counties. But understanding what's the urbanized envelope of the region, where are people living, where are their jobs, what are their needs, is like a big part of this. Next slide. And so just to give you a sense of how we're trying to contextualize those trends with the trends that are maybe more familiar, nearer and dearer to this group, is we're going to be sharing information like, okay, well, if we understand some things about how the structure of the region is changing and where our future needs might be, we can look at the age of our highway infrastructure and think about where there might be opportunities for new investment, and ask about what institutional relationships or arrangements might best facilitate that, what funding needs there might be, how might we, when we think at a structural level, really start thinking about the role of the transportation network within our economy. So, yeah. And when we drill down a bit more onto what transportation things we're going to be bringing forward, we'll bring those stories to you all to kind of fine tune them and make sure we're getting them right and bringing forward the most important, like, top line things that we need our civic leaders and our elected officials to really understand about the region. So yeah, that's just like a little taste of where we are going and where we are. And the next slide is, please save the date. We will be having our State of the Region event, which will also serve as the public launch for the Century Plan, on November 4th, from like the afternoon into the evening here at the old post office. We have never done an event like this before. It will also be CMAP's 20th anniversary. So I think it is, I will just say, we've been working really hard on this, and it's going to be extremely fun. And we hope that you are all there, because we have a lot of things planned that you wouldn't want to miss. So we'll get an email, save the date going soon, but for you calendar obsessives like me, you can maybe take that down now that this is where we're headed. But yeah, thank you for your attention, and like much more to come as we really get like rolling in a bigger way.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate that. Any questions, comments, discussion? Awesome. It was very good, comprehensive, a lot of good information. So appreciate that. All right, moving on to item 6.03, Regional Transportation Plan, or the RTP Plan update. After a short update on the RTP process by Ryan, Eric, Noah, and Elizabeth will share some key findings from asset management, congestion management, and the financial plan. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Ryan Tomto, principal on the policy team here at CMAP. I use he, him pronouns. We do have a lot of updates to share today on the progress of the development of the Regional Transportation Plan. I'm going to make my update a little bit short here so we can make sure we have time for everybody else. But want to just kind of ground everybody. We had this great presentation from Elizabeth Scott on the Century Plan, a reminder that this RTP is still rooted in Onto 2050. We see it as an extension of that. And the next RTP will then build off of the Century Plan once it's been adopted. So on the next slide, wanted to remind everybody of this RTP development process and really how we've been focused on these three overarching questions of what is the transportation system we want, what are the challenges and opportunities to get there, and how do we actually make it happen? And so for that first question, that was really where we did the emerging priorities work. This is the goals and objective setting exercise. And then that fed into the existing conditions work and the report that we presented on earlier this year that helped kind of highlight what some of those challenges and opportunities are out there. But those have really now converged, and we're now in the strategy development phase to answer that third question. And this includes casting a wide net for strategies that already exist and kind of looking at gaps where we need to fill. This also includes development of the financial plan for how we'll pay for it, the identification of capital projects to include in the plan, as well as implementation activities to include. So on the next slide, this really shows for strategy development, we've kind of bucketed into, it's really two groups, but split out the part that's underway here. But really, a part of this is about casting that net around existing planning activities where we've already worked as a region to build consensus around different topical areas. So again, this continuation of Onto 2050. So we're looking to, strategy papers and the recommendations that came out of that plan. But we also have the work that we did through mobility recovery, plan of action for regional transit, even things like the speed management paper and external partners work, such as Transit is the Answer, looking to those to pull in the recommendations so that those can be highlighted in the RTP. But we also know that there are additional things that we need to do in terms of filling the gaps. And so work that we've had underway includes the Climate Action Plan, the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, congestion management strategies, as well as the ongoing work to develop the financial plan. So in all of those spaces, we're working to develop strategies that will be included in the RTP. Additionally, we have other areas where we know that there are gaps in terms of policy development. And so we've been working with our consultant partners to develop policy briefs. And we have the topical areas here. We have Eric Kempel, who's been working with us to develop the first 4 bullet points there, the transportation asset management, intercity bus and rail, emerging technology, and innovative finance and project delivery briefs. And then working with CDM Smith to help develop reasonably expected revenue briefs for the financial plan. So today we have updates on congestion management strategies, where the team and the resource group that we've been working with in that space, where we're at right now, and kind of give a preview of the soon to be released congestion management strategy guidebook. And then we also have Eric Kempel here, who will be presenting on providing a preview of the transportation asset management policy brief that will be released within a month or so. And then finally, we have Elizabeth Ginsburg, the project manager of the financial plan, who will be providing an overview of where we're at with the development of the plan, as well as a preview of the work ahead to do a risk assessment, which is really where the strategies for the financial plan will come out of. And so on the last slide here, want to just point out that we have a lot of other work underway. Next month, we'll be coming back to this group with the update on the regional capital projects. Those are currently still working to evaluate those, but we'll be coming back with those evaluation results at that meeting. Before that, we will be meeting with the resource group and individual implementers to talk through those results with you all. And additionally, we have also had engagement, lots of engagement. The summertime has really been the main focus of our public outreach efforts. We've been all across the region, meeting people where they're at various events, as well as having numerous one-on-one conversations with various stakeholders throughout the region. Additionally, the RTP questionnaire has received over 1,100 responses so far and continue to get those in every day. So really excited about that. We've already exceeded our target for that for the year. So really excited how that's played out. And with that, I will hand it over to Eric Kempel, who will walk us through the asset management policy brief preview.
For that, I think we had a question here. I don't know if it was, yeah, go ahead, Heidi. I don't know if it was for Ryan or.
Hi, Heidi Files, Kane County. Thank you, Ryan, for the overview. I had a question before you get into the details. So we are undergoing our own travel demand model update, and we're using the socioeconomic assumptions that were used for the last adopted plan. But my understanding is you've worked very closely with a lot of our municipalities who are seeing rapid growth and whose numbers needed to be adjusted because maybe the previous time the modeling efforts had some issues because of the census data that came from basically the existing conditions assumptions were a little off. So my question is, since you're in the strategy development phase right now, you have your socioeconomic land use assumptions. Will you be able to share those with any of the implementers for use before the plan is adopted? I'm assuming that once you're in the strategy development phase, you're not going to be going back and readjusting your socioeconomic.
I'll probably have to look to Amy for this one,
okay.
but
Heidi, yeah, Amy Lee with CMAP. That work is underway.
Yeah.
We do have some initial draft outputs on that, and so we'll be visiting with the COGS to kind of feel that out. There's still a process of ground truthing the draft outputs of the socioeconomic forecast.
I'm sorry, did you say ground truthing? What did you say?
Well, in that, right, there's local knowledge about
Sure,
things
yeah.
that are going on that we want to cross-check with, right? And so it's one thing when you have a model spit something out, but you
Yeah.
may not be trusting of all of its raw outputs, right? And so that's the process that we'll be sort of undertaking over the next few months.
Yeah.
But we won't have a final forecast, socioeconomic forecast, until adoption of the RTP.
Will you be able to share draft forecasts just so we could do like a sensitivity analysis compared to our previous?
Yeah, let's talk offline and
Okay.
we can exchange notes on
Okay,
that.
awesome, thank you.
All right. How's everybody doing? All right. Well, that's as high as that goes. I thought I could hide behind it a little bit more, but I guess I can't. So if we go on to the next slide here, as Ryan said, I'm going to be talking about the policy briefs, one in particular, asset management. I think he already set the table pretty well about why we're doing these policy briefs and the actually 5 policy briefs that are going on, the 4 that I'm working on, which is the 4 on the screen right there. And really at the end of the day, as he said, these are focused on the strategy development to support the RTP development. But these are very brief memos of sorts, 15 to 20 pages, that are attempting to maybe push the envelope for the region a little bit and just get everybody thinking, brainstorming, maybe spark some ideas. We look at kind of the current state of the practice in the region at a pretty high level, some emerging trends and issues locally and across the country, kind of poke around to find some peer examples and then summarize maybe some opportunities for the region. So if we move on to the next slide, we're talking about the asset management paper that's in progress. Eventually, you all will get a paper with more detail in it. We're just kind of giving you a little preview today. And why focus on asset management for a policy brief? I probably don't need to explain to the folks in this room why that's important. Aging assets, declining revenues, competing priorities, new technologies, and more diversity in the types of assets that are out there in the transportation system. And so what I'll want to hear back from you all at the end, or maybe later after you've had some time to think about it, is, are there particular ideas here that resonate, things that maybe we ought to explore a little bit more moving forward? If we move on to the next slide, as Ryan mentioned, he and his team have delivered an existing conditions report earlier in the year. So you all should be familiar with some of this information. And again, with the folks in this room, I think this is not news, right? We have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of different types of infrastructure. And we're quite blessed to have such an extensive legacy transportation system. When we move to the next slide, sometimes a synonym for legacy is old or aging, right? And so that's the flip side of that and the challenge that we face. This particular graph, again, from the existing conditions report, is NHS bridge deck condition. And obviously you can see from this, fair bit in the yellow and red, the fair and poor category, particularly with those eras where there was a large burst of construction activity. And so that's kind of the cards that were dealt here. And so there's funding challenges with that, obviously. If we move to the next slide, we can look at this across a variety of different asset classes. Again, this information comes from CMAP documentation. Some progress has been made. If we look at this, these assets are pavement and bridge condition for NHS. Generally, the region has kind of held the line on poor pavement and bridges, and that's an accomplishment when you have this much aging infrastructure. Honestly, even declining performance can be progress, right? Because it just declined less than it would have if you had done nothing. And so that's, sometimes, unfortunately, you have a declining target. And so I think what we see here is a mixed bag of some progress, but certainly places where additional funding could help to make those numbers look better. And similarly, if we go to the next slide on transit asset conditions, also a mixed bag. You're going to see some improvement in non-revenue vehicles, transit facilities, track that's under performance restrictions. Those things, some of those things held steady as well. We saw that fixed route vehicles that were past their useful life. Actually, if you sort of follow the trend over time after COVID, you see a jump, and then it kind of comes back down again into reasonable territory. So I think we can count that as some progress as well. And then if we move to the next slide, this one, Elizabeth already talked about this in her presentation. The lighter yellow colors are newer, darker are older. Left is told, right is untold. Interstate takeaway here, yeah, it's amazing, but you can do with stable funding, right? So that's something that we see in other regions as well, and different approaches to looking at funding for asset management. If we go to the next slide, what are some of the emerging trends that we see in this space? And I got a couple here, and some of them, again, are not going to be surprising. Obviously, the big one that everybody deals with in every region across every asset class is aging assets and declining revenues. Again, no surprise, we've talked about this already. So, if I move on to the next item here, connected and autonomous vehicles oh, sorry, previous slide. Connected and autonomous vehicles along with electric vehicles. There's obviously a lot of transportation system benefits. There are benefits to the overall society. But from an asset management perspective, there are some challenges here to be aware of. And that is in terms of changing travel patterns, both at the macro and the micro level that impact the infrastructure. So think about platooning with autonomous vehicles and how those tire tracks impact pavement in particular ways. Electric trucks, you get more weight with batteries and electric cars as well. But with trucks, not only do you get more weight from the batteries, but one of the things we learned in this is how there's more torque created on the tires, on the wheels of electric trucks that create greater shear forces on pavement, which is not normally designed for. New types of infrastructure. This is not just new types of infrastructure, but even old types of infrastructure that we just don't normally incorporate into our asset management systems in a systematic or monitored way. And so think about bike peds, signals, retaining walls, ITS, and there's a growing list of technology that is part of our transportation system. So if we now move to the next slide, shifting mobility patterns. What do we really mean by that? Well, I think especially if you think about post-COVID, there's a shift obviously in travel demand and what infrastructure is being stressed by excessive usage in which way. I think, again, if we think about this from an asset management perspective, it's particularly an issue in regards to trucks. The increase in online shopping and deliveries, and the great increase in freight and trucks. You know, I don't need to tell Will County about that, obviously. So that's something that regions are dealing with. Extreme weather events. You all watch the news. Hasn't been a good few months for those types of things, and that adds another layer of challenge to how regions are needing to think about the sustainability and the resilience, really, of their infrastructure. Now, there's a couple here that provide, I would say, fall more into the opportunity column. Some of these have been more risks to sort of watch out for. But if we look at the unmanned aerial vehicles, otherwise known as drones, right, this actually helps us to inspect infrastructure, for example. Something that I know agencies around here are already working with, IDOT, Tollway, CTA. LiDAR sort of falls into that category as well. It's another thing in the toolkit that allows us to collect better and extremely detailed asset condition data and then see at a really minute level how that changes over time. And combine that with AI, it's a pretty powerful approach for some predictive modeling on what's happening with your assets. If we go to the next slide. Now, we looked at a couple of peer examples around the country. And frankly, a lot of these examples, they're really just emphasizing what this region is already doing as well. They just maybe help to sort of support that direction or maybe provide some additional nuances and ideas. And like I said, maybe some things to work with. That first bullet, that focus on preservation before expanding. And most MPOs these days are really putting most of their dollars towards that for all the obvious reasons. Anchoring in performance targets. Again, obviously, this MPO, this region using performance targets. Lots of good examples how other regions are incorporating asset management into target setting. The coordination across agencies, and I'll add not just across agencies, but across functional areas that all have a role to play in maintaining the system. Data-driven prioritization. Peer MPOs out there creating data and tools and leveraging that in their RTPs and tips. And then support for local governments and smaller agencies through that technical assistance and creation of regional tools and maybe the kind of consolidation of planning responsibilities where that makes sense. If we go to the next slide, there are more examples in the paper, but just in the interest of time, hitting on a couple. If we look at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, this is the San Francisco Bay Area, they offer a great regional model and approach for their pavement technical assistance. And in particular, through something that they call Street Saver and a suite of tools kind of around that. And really what they're doing is helping local jurisdictions within the MPO maintain standardized pavement databases. And this is also used to sort of track towards their pavement condition index that they use for the region. And the program basically supports data collection, decision-making, consistency across every city, village, and county. And then that feeds into the MTC's platform, and they're able to then create their funding priorities for the RTP. And an additional kind of little cool tool that they add in there is they created an app, a mobile app that pairs with the Street Saver platform. And that actually empowers the roadway owners and operators to go out in the field and collect real-time condition data and compute these pavement condition scores on site. So it's just kind of a good showcase for mobile technology and kind of consolidated systems that can really sort of ensure that you've got regional asset management, state of good repair investments that are all kind of aligned with the same set of goals. If we go to the next slide, just look really quickly at Atlanta. The first bullet is really just about the TIP and their scoring procedure. They've got a really detailed manual on how points are allocated for TIP projects, all of which then line up very directly with their RTP goals and their objectives and the performance measures, and asset management is very much part of that. The other points here are really more about a broader concept of the idea of consolidated responsibilities in some areas where it makes sense, where the MPO and another sort of new regional agency down there have kind of supported smaller entities that may not have the capacity or tools to conduct some of the asset management work. If we go to the next slide, I'll just round out with a couple quick examples here. Dallas, Fort Worth, that's the first bullet, and really kind of the fourth bullet, NCTCOG. They emphasize operational improvements over high-cost capacity projects as a result of their use of life cycle cost analysis and scenario modeling to really kind of focus on how can they make cost-effective performance gains. And the third bullet, Portland, their Bureau of Transportation has a pretty cool cross-functional, as opposed to just cross-jurisdictional body that consists of engineers and operations staff and IT managers and finance teams and so forth, to really kind of take their asset management priorities and integrate them kind of across business practices within the region, within the organization. So if we move on to the final slide, what kind of opportunities do we see sort of bubbling up from that potentially? You kind of boil those down into these five that you see on the screen now, in terms of what sort of things maybe the MPO or jurisdictions within the MPO might be able to gain from some of this. And improving data coverage, quality, and usability, that's maybe not surprising for something like asset management, right? And this is kind of beyond just the core requirements of what gets reported to the feds and so forth. But again, thinking about all these other assets that either are aging now and need to be maintained, or maybe you're just putting out into the field as we speak, right? Roads, of course, local roads, all levels of roads, sidewalks, pedestrian facilities, maybe it's digital assets, EV charging stations, and so forth. Onto the second box, supporting and strengthening that organizational capacity, particularly for all of the units of local government. And so again, a lot of that is already being done by the MPO and seems to be going well. The technical assistance, the pilots, various data initiatives, providing access to shared tools, funding resources, training, peer learning opportunities that can build that lasting capacity. And then just really tightening in on the coordination, roles, and responsibilities so everybody's on the same page about who's doing what.
those innovative tools we talked about, the data collection tools, different interesting ways of monitoring things, real time, AI. Everybody talks about AI. I'm sure there's opportunities here. Scenario modeling, we talked about a little bit in some of those examples. The broader adoption of life cycle forecasting for not just asset management, but capital project selection as well. And then just making sure that the system is geared to accommodate future technologies, the electric vehicles, the electric trucks, the autonomous vehicles. If we look at linking asset condition directly to capital programming at scale, that's another thing that we saw with the San Francisco example, with the Atlanta example, with the Dallas example. And then thinking about the resilience of the system from an asset management perspective. And then the final box on there, again, what couldn't we do with more money, right? So the key is not just the funding, but the predictability of the funding. It's hard to maintain your assets if you don't know what money is coming in from year to year. So that's all I've got. But do you have any immediate thoughts or questions before you go home and ponder all that?
All right, any questions or comments on this portion, the asset management stuff? Yes, Tara.
Thank you for that presentation. Just a question about the condition of the bridges. What data did you use for that? Was it sufficiency rating or the NBI rating?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I'm actually going to go back to Ryan, who I know pulled together that as part of the existing conditions report. I think that's the graph.
That's NBI data.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yes, Amy.
Hi, Amy Reinell. I know how important this is for our region. Obviously, the data shows that. It's also it's like a financial burden hanging over us, some of the assets that are past their useful life. So I'm just curious if there's a framework we could be thinking about for a really intentional but surgical approach to thinking about what do we phase out entirely? Like what doesn't need to be repaired? What do we no longer need anymore? Because I think the way we plan right now is we have it, it's in the list, but are there things that could use a good look at being phased out especially in terms of roadway?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I didn't necessarily include examples in there at the moment, but like I can think of one. It's a bit older of an example. I think this might have been about 10 years ago or so. The Iowa Department of Transportation took that approach. They had previously, obviously Iowa has a lot of rural areas, a lot of farm areas. The Iowa DOT had previously taken an approach of we pave everything. Every last farm road, everything gets paved. And at a certain point, they came to a realization that just, from an asset management perspective, was not feasible to sustain. So they came up with a process, a system, a set of criteria for saying these are roads that we will let return to gravel. And these are the roads that are the high priority roads, and that's what we focus on. And that was a strategy, right? So there are examples of places that take that strategy for sure.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. I know we're getting up against time a little bit too, but just kind of add on to that, just overall, I think, as a region, we'll have to kind of look at, anyway, the asset management, and it's key, the state of good repair, and then just obviously trying to prioritize that against all the other things that we want and need to do too, like, safety and transit and all that kind of stuff. But just, for speaking for Lake County, just our experience with like the pavement management stuff is that when you don't address those, speaking towards roads, right, that's what we do. But when you don't address those roads and resurface them, then you let them go into a reconstruction. The cost is like tenfold, you know what I mean? So it's definitely key to try to hit them. I know IDOT's got the TAMP plan and a lot of the counties and stuff do too, but we're really trying to focus on, and if we can try to consider that in the plan, hey, where can we focus on resurfacing and rehabbing those roads cheaper So the ones that are still in good condition, remain in good condition and don't get to reconstruction level, which the cost is going to go way up and get worse. So just a comment and kind of tying into what Amy was saying too, just overall, we're going to have to look at, prioritization and if there's programs or policies or things we can put in place, excuse me, to try to just be efficient with those dollars and stuff too. So
That's really the life cycle cost approach of saying, over the next 30 years, what's really going to be the cheapest way of addressing that? So that's a really good point.
yeah, but a lot of us focused, historically, it's always been worst first, and it's been coming back to the pavement management priorities of, hey, let's get the good ones and keep those good, and then we'll address the bad ones, when we can. But any other comments or questions for Eric? All right, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add in terms of asset management, we'll be coming back later this year to talk about this again after the brief has been released. And then we'll also be working to set the asset management targets for our federal performance measures. So Martin will be joining us then to go through that activity as well. But now I'll hand it over to Noah Harris.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? My name is Noah Harris. I'm a policy analyst with CMAP, and today I'll be providing an update on congestion management. I'll start with just a quick reminder of what the congestion management process is as a function, and then I'll spend the bulk of my presentation on previewing the forthcoming congestion management strategy guidebook, and then I'll close with a quick look ahead towards implementation. So what is the congestion management process? As a reminder, federal regulations establish the CMP as a required component of regional transportation planning for urbanized areas with populations over 200,000. The Federal Highway Administration defines the CMP as a systematic and regionally accepted approach for managing congestion that provides information on system performance and that assesses strategies that meet state and local needs. So we know that congestion is a significant challenge for our region, and we know that no one agency alone can tackle that challenge. And so the CMP offers an opportunity to develop a regionally cohesive approach to managing congestion that's aligned with all of our transportation planning goals and that relies on all of the tools in our collective toolbox. Next slide. Cool. So yeah, that's why we established a resource group to help guide our comprehensive update to the regional congestion management process. That resource group is made up of both technical and policy perspectives, including representatives from state and county departments of transportation, transit representatives, and other non-governmental partners, all bringing their unique subject matter expertise and experiences on congestion management. Next slide. So regional congestion management follows an 8-step process that's established by FHWA, shown in the graphic on the right here, starting with the establishment of objectives and the network and the performance measures, followed by data collection and analyses of congestion problems and needs. Identifying and assessing strategies to manage congestion is the 6th step of that 8-step process, and that's where I'm going to zoom in today for the remainder of my presentation. So in support of that 6th step, identifying and assessing strategies, we've developed a congestion management strategy guidebook. The purpose of the guidebook is to provide a framework for addressing congestion across Northeastern Illinois, outlining a broad range of strategies and strategy types for consideration. It's a resource that's intended for transportation agencies, local governments, and planning partners who are responsible for identifying and evaluating and implementing strategies that reduce congestion and improve the performance of the transportation system. The guidebook itself offers a framework for strategy identification called the Mobility Solutions Ladder, shown on the right. The ladder organizes available strategies into a clear, tiered structure that prioritizes practical, cost-effective solutions before considering more complex or capital-intensive ones. Working from bottom to top, it encourages partners to first consider strategies that preserve the system, reduce vehicle miles traveled, encourage mode shift, and improve traffic operations, reserving major roadway capacity additions as a last step when the others are insufficient. However, we know that not all congestion solutions are created equal, and not every strategy or even every tier is the right fit for every situation. And we also know that many of the strategies are going to serve multiple of these tiers. And as such, this is a very flexible framework simply to help guide smart use of limited budgets while delivering better outcomes for travelers and communities across the region. So from here, I'll step through each of these tiers and provide a little bit of definition and some strategy examples to give a sense for what's going to be included in the guidebook. While not always classified as a traditional congestion management strategy, system preservation plays a foundational role in maintaining reliable mobility, making it the first tier of the ladder. And echoing Eric's presentation from earlier, with limited budgets, prioritizing preservation of the existing system first is key, especially before considering investments that expand the system. These strategies focus on keeping roads, bridges, bikeways, and transit infrastructure in good working condition. Timely maintenance and asset management reduce the risk of unexpected disruptions, such as lane closures due to pavement failures or signal outages that can create sudden and severe congestion. And by investing in preservation early, we can extend the life of that infrastructure, improve reliability, and avoid costly emergency repairs that compound congestion. The next tier is to reduce vehicle miles traveled. Just jumping in here. So focuses on decreasing the number and length of vehicle trips, particularly during times when congestion is most severe at the peak period. These strategies include supporting land use patterns that shorten travel distances and implementing pricing mechanisms that shift travel to off-peak periods. By directly reducing demand on the roadway network, VMT reduction strategies can provide long-lasting congestion relief without generating new travel that may offset initial performance improvements while also supporting system preservation and encouraging mode shift. The next slide, which is to encourage mode shift. Yeah, so just jumping in there. So mode shift strategies also contribute to VMT reduction. They're addressed separately in the ladder to recognize the unique role of expanding travel options and rebalancing how the system is used. This is especially true for Northeastern Illinois with an expansive regional transit system that sets the foundation for robust mode shift opportunities. Mode shift encourages people to move from single occupancy vehicle trips to alternatives like transit, biking, and walking. And distinguishing mode shift from broader VMT reduction strategies also emphasizes the importance of user choice and access to high-quality transportation alternatives. The next tier is strategies to improve traffic operations. Traffic operations improvements aim to enhance the efficiency, safety, and reliability of existing roadways without expanding physical capacity. Just keeping it going here. That slide will include strategies like signal timing optimization, improved signage, updated intersection designs, coordinated incident management, and other ITS strategies. And these strategies are often cost-effective and relatively quick to implement, delivering meaningful benefits for both passenger and freight movements. And moving ahead one more slide, finally, we have strategies to expand capacity. That slide will address bottlenecks through roadway capacity additions involving expanding road infrastructure to accommodate traffic that cannot be effectively managed through the other means and the other tiers. These strategies may include adding lanes, constructing new interchanges, or building bypass routes, particularly addressing freight travel, interregional trips, and safety or operational challenges. Roadway capacity projects are generally considered only after strategies throughout the rest of the hierarchy have been found insufficient, given their higher costs and longer implementation timelines. So in addition to all of these tiers, if you go to the next slide, the guidebook lays out strategies across the tiers of the mobility solutions ladder, but it also highlights key congestion management strategies that benefit from regional coordination. These strategies were identified as priorities through the resource group process and through additional stakeholder outreach and engagement. Those 5 key strategies are ITS, traffic incident management, transit operations, land use and design, and pricing. They're elevated to the regional scale, not only because of their potential to provide significant positive impacts on mitigating congestion, but also due to their technical complexity and the level of collaboration required across jurisdictions, agencies, and modes.
Yeah, just apologies for those online and in the room. We're clearly having technical problems with our slides. So after the meeting, we can make sure that slides are made available to you all.
Thanks, Amy. So implementing these 5 strategies here on the screen at a broader scale allows the region to take a more unified and efficient approach, and regional coordination enhances consistency in how these strategies are deployed, improves interoperability between systems, and ensures that the tools and technologies work seamlessly across boundaries. This collaborative approach allows the region to maximize the collective impact of local and corridor level investments, and recognizes that the most effective solutions are often developed and implemented together. So my last slide after this is just a quick look ahead to next steps. In the coming weeks, we'll share with our resource group the draft strategies guidebook, and then we'll publish it from there and shift to finalizing our comprehensive corridor study template, which is a companion resource that will provide guidance on planning for congestion management strategies at the corridor level. Additionally, staff will work with our performance data and with our partners, such as you all, to evaluate and identify priority corridors for congestion management. And those will be great candidates for the application of these resources like the guidebook and the template itself. And as we wrap up this effort, we'll hand off the key strategies and the corridor information to the Regional Transportation Plan for inclusion in the full plan. Yeah, so that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Noah. Any questions on this portion? All right, thanks, Noah. Good job working through the slide issues too. So.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you again. I'm Elizabeth Ginsburg. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior policy analyst in RPI division here at CMAP. And this morning, I'll be giving you all an update on the financial plan. I'll say we're still working on the numbers, so it'll be a little less heavy of an update than last time. But next slide. Just as a reminder, the RTP is federally required to be fiscally constrained, and that's why we do the financial plan. And that really means that we can show that there's sufficient funding to cover all of the costs anticipated by the plan, which includes the operation, the maintenance, the enhancement, and the expansion of the system. So a lot of the same things we've been talking about this morning. Next slide. The work that underpins the financial plan is a combination of research into past trends, analytical assumptions, and a variety of different methodological choices. And everything really comes together in the forecasts of the various transportation revenues, and then the cost estimates that are developed in partnership with you all. However, as any forecaster will tell you, there is a lot of inherent uncertainty in all of this type of analysis, and there are realities and unknowns that we can never really account for. For instance, both revenue and expenditure forecasts are subject to different economic, policy, and implementation conditions that might change how present day realities change in the future. Events that we didn't anticipate, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, might shift the priorities and the issues at any point in time. So for these reasons, there is inherent risk in the identification of a fiscal constraint. Next slide. As we think about these risks, we're starting work on what we're calling a risk assessment, which is going to provide us with the opportunity to kind of systematically identify, prioritize, and analyze the different risks that are associated with key financial assumptions in the plan. This will allow us to better communicate the strengths and limitation of the work, and also identify the areas where better decision-making and targeted strategies can mitigate the likelihood and impact of risks that are identified. Next slide. There are 4 kind of overarching components of the risk assessment, which are pretty straightforward. We've been working with the financial plan resource group to work through the first 2 steps, which includes identifying the broadest possible spectrum of possible risks, and then assessing and prioritizing them in order to identify the risks that are most likely to occur and are most likely to impact the fiscal constraint over the planning period. Right now, we're working on a scope for the RTP consultant team who will help us with steps 3 and 4, which will really be conducting analysis on these risks and identifying and refining the strategies that we can incorporate to address them. Next slide. So through this process, we've identified 5 overarching risk categories, and I'm just going to walk through them really quickly for you. The first is a pretty familiar one, the idea that our baseline revenues may be insufficient to cover the costs identified in the plan. This can include anything from federal formula funding falling short of what we forecasted, to fuel efficiency gains impacting the revenues that our state currently uses, to local governments not having capacity to match federal and state programs, which would result in less funding overall. The second risk category is the transit operations declining. This can look like operating revenues being insufficient to support current operating levels. I think we are all familiar with this right now. It can include transit ridership not returning to previous levels and impacts on congestion as a result of that. And it could look like continued TNC usage growing. The last 3 are all kind of related to cost risks. So there's a risk that costs continue to grow and then we don't fully anticipate for those costs in the financial plan work. In conversations over the last couple of weeks with the service boards, we've been hearing a lot about bus purchase costs and the increases that we're seeing because of supply issues. We also know that labor shortages could continue to drive up costs. Another one is that infrastructure needs grow beyond what we can anticipate at this time. For instance, we know extreme weather events may continue to impact the assets that we have. And as Eric mentioned earlier, it's likely that heavier vehicles will impose greater wear and tear on our roadways. Last but not least, there's a risk that limited coordination results in missed opportunities for the region. Projects like the Harvey Transportation Center, which was really a collaborative effort between PACE, Metra, and the city of Harvey, may not move forward or may cost more without cooperation or detailed planning. Next slide. Like I said, many of these risks are not new ideas, but the risk assessment allows us to identify the strategies that we can include in the RTP to address these risks. The top one and the one here on this slide, the risk of not having sufficient revenues to cover the costs, is certainly more of a known certainty than an uncertainty. And this allows us to use our kind of pre-established structure to identify reasonably expected revenues as a mitigation strategy for not having sufficient revenue. Next slide. Reasonably expected revenues have been used in many of the past metropolitan transportation plans to identify how new revenue sources could be used to expand the fiscal constraint. And this goes all the way back to GO to 2040. The policy ideas themselves have evolved and kind of shifted, but they've all kind of fallen within the same set of standard categories that you can see on the left hand of the slide. This includes modernizing the state's sales tax base to tax services, transitioning from the motor fuel tax to a road usage charge, expanding tolling and congestion pricing in different ways across the system, expanding parking pricing, and using other transportation user fees or transportation adjacent revenues to support the system. Next slide. With these past policy positions in mind, we've worked with CDM Smith to draft a transportation funding strategies policy brief that will be published on the Financial Plan Resource Group Engagement Headquarter page next week. The policy brief explores a variety of revenue mechanisms ranging from transportation user fees, which have long been considered viable strategies, freight fees, which are more recently a topic of conversation in our region, and things like financializing carbon policy to support transportation, which is not currently used in our region, but is used in peer regions across the country. For each revenue category, the policy brief explores or provides an overview of the mechanism in question, shares some information about the current status of that revenue in our region and previous planning efforts, and provides examples from other regions or counties or countries. The brief also provides an assessment of each revenue mechanism using the policy and process criteria here on this slide. So things like how durable will the revenue be over time, and what is the administrative feasibility of implementing the revenue within the planning period. In addition to this policy brief, CDM Smith is working on a tolling and congestion pricing policy brief, and we've been working on a road usage charge white paper in-house that we hope to release in the next month or so. Next slide. Knowing that reasonably expected revenues were going to be a part of the financial plan, we've been talking about this with the resource group for some time. And with their feedback and in the work of CDM Smith, we've been able to identify recommendations for the reasonably expected revenues that should be included in this financial plan. And these are the ones that we're currently working on developing estimates for. They include sales tax modernization, and transitioning from the motor fuel tax to a road usage charge, also tolling highway reconstruction projects. These three reasonably expected revenues were ranked the highest by the resource group. We're also looking at a retail delivery fee. As you may know, this was recently proposed in the legislature as a funding revenue source for transit, but it has also previously been on the list of reasonably expected revenues for the transportation system as a whole. And then lastly, a regional revenue source. There are a variety of different revenue mechanisms that this could include, something like a TNC fee, something like a regional motor vehicle registration surcharge. But the idea being that if the region has its own funding source, we can reduce reliance on the state and the federal government for funding that has less reliability in the long run. So next slide, I think this is just a timeline of where we are. I think we chatted with you last spring about our baseline revenue forecast. We have been working diligently on developing the cost estimates and now forecasting these reasonably expected revenues, and we hope to bring them all together for you soon. Any questions?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any questions on the financial components here? All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate it. Ryan, anything more from the group, or that's it? All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time and the good presentation. Moving on to item 6.04, Kasha is here to provide an update on recent legislative activities. Good morning, Kasha.
All right, good morning, everyone. Maybe I will lower this just a tiny bit. Okay. Just a quick federal and state legislative update for you all. I know it's been a couple of months since we've last convened, so a few things to update the group on. Starting with the federal side of things, so the House has adjourned until September, and then today is the final day of session for the Senate until their August recess. On July 4th, the president signed into law what's been dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was passed via the budget reconciliation process. While this bill has fewer direct impacts on the transportation sector, one of the most significant impacts of the bill are changes to how federal governments fund Medicaid and SNAP benefits. So in turn, state and local governments are left to navigate how to fill and to what extent to fill this budget gap, which is exacerbating state budgetary pressures, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. Probably seen some news regarding what's happening with FY26 appropriations. So just for context, on July 17th, the House Appropriations Committee advanced its FY26 Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, or THUD proposal. And then about a week later, the Senate Appropriations Committee approved their version of a THUD spending bill. Both of these bills differ in terms of the policy provisions that are included, the extent to which they rely on the diversion of IIJA funds, and new appropriations. So there's still some daylight between these bills. And as I mentioned, we're approaching August recess, so less time to address that difference. The deadline to pass an appropriations package is September 30th. So, unless there is another continuing resolution that's enacted. So that's something that we're monitoring, and, happy to provide a longer update at our September meeting as we learn more. Just a brief update to stepping away from the legislative side, but on the judicial side, on June 19th, the U.S. District Court for the District of Rhode Island issued a preliminary injunction that prevented U.S. DOT from imposing immigration enforcement conditions on federal funding recipients. So funding that was previously held up or stalled is now moving through as grant agreements are executed. So just wanted to share a little bit of good news there. And then finally, on the federal front, just a couple of updates on surface transportation reauthorization. So as you all know, these conversations are ongoing. Both chambers have expressed an eagerness to move swiftly and have a draft proposal by this fall, which is very quick, fall's right around the corner. As a reminder, IIJA is set to expire at the end of September 2026, so about a year and change left on that. House T&I held several hearings over the summer on reauthorization. Senate EPW just held a hearing a couple of weeks ago, gathering additional input from industry stakeholders for their perspectives on reauthorization. US DOT also recently held a reauthorization kickoff event to bring together congressional leadership, state DOTs, and key transportation stakeholders to initiate collaboration on a new bill. US DOT also recently issued an RFI seeking stakeholder feedback on reauthorization priorities. They noted in the RFI that the department's priorities for reauthorization include improving safety, streamlining federal processes, promoting economic growth, and strengthening partnerships. So we are continuing to work with many of you all on developing some shared principles for reauthorization that reflect the region's priorities. And we're also facilitating an effort with some of our other major metro MPOs to articulate priorities from that vantage point as well. And we'll be wrapping that up in the next couple of weeks. I think that's all for the federal, and then moving to the state side. So just want to build on Amy's earlier update regarding the Strengthening Communities Initiative. We were successful in our $2 million funding ask to the General Assembly to expand our offerings to municipalities into more transportation adjacent fields, as we are directed to do in the Regional Planning Act. That funding is coming through DHS, which is a new partner for us. So we are working with them to demonstrate how supporting local governments and their economic development and their local planning work, their climate work, fosters improved quality of life. So we're excited for that to be moving forward. And then I know when we last convened, it was the second to last day of session. So I trust folks are staying apprised of what's happening in the General Assembly regarding transit funding, but just very quickly, the Senate did pass a bill with minutes remaining in session that included very similar governance and operational language as the House. It also inserted several funding provisions. Since then, we've been working to better understand what are some of the new costs that are generated by these system enhancements and these operational improvements that are included in the bill, as well as what are the revenue projections for the options included. While that work progresses, we continue to meet with legislators, local government officials, business stakeholders, other key partners in, discussing the importance of addressing the fiscal cliff with both sustainable and adequate revenues. So that includes funding that is sufficient to meet the needs of the fiscal cliff and support the system improvements that, the bill contemplates, but also recognizing there's a temporal aspect here too. So the need to avert the fiscal cliff in the short term, but also enact long-term revenues to provide a system with sustainable, predictable revenues in the long term. And this is really where much of our conversation has been around the paper that we have talked about before with this group on modernizing the sales tax, which we co-authored with the Illinois Economic Policy Institute, the Civic Federation, Center for Tax and Budget Accountability, looking at how we expand our sales tax base to include services. In the context of what I shared at the top regarding how federal actions are sort of shifting the state budget picture, sales tax modernization offers the benefits of not only providing significant ongoing revenues to our transit system, but also providing additional support to our state and local governments during this time. So the General Assembly is not scheduled to convene again until veto session in mid-October. So we'll continue to keep you all apprised as we learn more and conversations progress. Happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Kasha. Any questions on this? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Kasha. Appreciate it. Moving on to other business. Is there any other business that committee members would like to bring forward today? All right, seeing none. Public comment. I do believe we have some folks online that would like to make a comment. Anyone else in the audience? Have we gotten anyone today? Nothing.
Well, good morning. This is Paul Jones. Good morning.
Morning, John Paul. How you doing?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I really appreciate today's session. It was pretty helpful in terms of what's happening in Springfield and the opportunities we have to rethink the next Go-To 50 plan. Those concepts for the new century plan is we most appreciate in the neighborhoods. I know when we first got started in Inglewood and also on the south side with the Red Line, it was a learning experience for us with the 2040 plan and how we was able to get communities engagement. Going forward, we should certainly take advantage of the CMAP's public participation plan that was created last year. And I think the more we can take that plan and put it to use as a tool for the engagement, we may be onto something that not only Chicago can use, but also another agency that we don't talk much about is the McPeer Authority and how they can be more helpful in the region. So hoping to see that century plan be one which we can get those bodies of agencies involved. Just wanted to just again thank you for this information today. It was pretty helpful.
You're welcome. Thank you for the comment too, John Paul. I appreciate it. Anyone else? Gamma? Okay. No one else for public comment. Moving on to item 9. The next meeting for us is scheduled September 12th, 2025. And with that, seeing no other business in front of the committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, Jack, second. All right. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.